Now, here to talk about how much time this guy might be facing is former DDA and now criminal defense attorney Anna Young. Welcome back to Primetime, Anna.
Thank you, Taylor, for having me.
Okay, so I think this is one of the craziest, bizarre stories coming out of San Diego in a very long time. I mean, probably the craziest story I've ever heard.
I do too. I think the facts in this case are so egregious that it's almost as though you can't even believe that it happened. It's something that you see in a movie.
In the horror films that they have now, they're always taking it to one step higher to see if they can, terrify people. This story is terrifying.
Right, and this story is so terrifying because there's so many different factors and facts that play into it that make it even that much more salacious. I mean, what I've read is that this man would walk around the neighborhood dressed in women's clothing. I read that the wife, the dismembered wife, would walk around with a knife, always had a knife in her hand. And at sometimes she would stand in the corner and start disrobing herself and just start undressing. Neighbors were interviewed, and all the neighbors were saying that they just became some kind of fixture in that neighborhood, that they were just known as a bizarre couple, an elderly couple at that, 73 years old and 68. And then you come to find that they find her head in a freezer. I mean, we're talking about
dismembered and with a meat grinder going.
Oh, right, meat grinder, a bone cutting saw. We're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer type of facts here.
Yeah.
Right, and it's almost hard to believe, and it's a very gruesome story.
Yeah, we don't know if he's full-on Jeffrey Dahmer because we don't know how long ago her body was, there, like when she passed. We don't have that exact.
That's correct, and the deputy district attorney, Ms. Flaherty, made a point to say that when the police came there, he was in the process of dismembering her body. So they don't know what the cause of death was, and they don't know whether it was November 1st or whether it was November 16th. And I think that the autopsy is going to reflect that.
Will they be able, the autopsy, because he destroyed a lot of the evidence, I guess the head was frozen, so that helps. Right?
Exactly, and I think the coroner is going to have a lot to deal with in terms of describing what the cause of death is and the time of death, because a lot of that actually has to deal with the legal analysis in place. Because is this a type of situation where he was dismembering her while she was alive? Is it a torturous situation, or did he bludgeon her to death and then she was already dead?
Or did she die of natural causes?
Right,
that could have happened.
Right, and that's why neighbors were saying that there's just a foul smell emanating from that house,
which would only happen if the body had passed days before.
Right, and if it was in a decomposition state.
Correct.
Exactly. So I think that from a prosecutor's perspective, I think that what they're looking at is, okay, let's just establish what the cause of death is, and then let's decide what kind of case is this. And my understanding is that they're proceeding under a first-degree murder with premeditation and deliberation. That coupled with unlawful disposal of human remains. So this is a situation where they're going to have a lot to prove based upon the evidence, and how did it get to that point.
And that head is the telling factor, because all the other evidence is pretty much destroyed.
Right. Exactly.
But the head was frozen. There's going to be a lot. The DNA, the cells were frozen.
Exactly.
If it was frozen right away, right?
And that's the issue, is that parts of her body were, I believe, frying in the frying pan, and I think there were bones in certain bags, but her head in and of itself was in the freezer. I don't know what kind of state it was, but you're right, it was frozen.
And who knows? Who really knows? I mean, I know they said that he's mentally sane, but they did kind of insane things. So.
Right, and I think from a defense perspective, that's something that's very important, because there's a really big difference between being legally insane and then being legally competent.
What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds complicated, but really what it comes down to is your state of mind at the time of the incident versus your state of mind now. So at the time of the incident, was he suffering from a mental disease that would preclude him from knowing the difference between right and wrong, and understanding and appreciating the difference between right and wrong? That's the difference as to whether someone's legally insane or sane. Now, when you talk about competence, it's about now. Can he understand the proceedings now? Is he in a position where he can participate in his own defense? And that's something that certainly a lot of times people confuse, but there really is a significant difference between the two.
Okay, we have more to talk about. This is a big case going on, and I have more questions to ask you. But first, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back as soon as we take our break. So Anna, we were talking about the case, and we were talking about mental competency and everything else.
Right.
How is the his defense going to help him? I mean, what strategy can they possibly have?
I think strategy is going to be very important as to his mental state at the time of the incident. Is this going to be a not guilty by reason of insanity plea where they are going to contest his sanity at the time of the incident? So instead of saying this was an intentional killing with premeditation and deliberation, they're going to say not guilty by reason of insanity because he couldn't.
He pleaded not guilty.
Right, he pleaded not guilty, and they can always change that to not guilty by reason of insanity. So what's likely going to happen is that they're going to get him seen by a forensic psychologist to figure out what his status is.
I mean, just what we've seen, you don't think a person doesn't like saying if he,
right.
I know he allegedly did this, but if it turns out he did do this. So let's say that happens. Take me down that road.
Absolutely.
He won't go to prison. Where will he go?
So what happens is they determine what his mental state is, and sometimes it could be a battle of the experts. The prosecutor's expert might say, you know what, he knew exactly what he was doing, as evidenced by the fact that there was domestic violence results, there was domestic violence calls before, he knew what he was doing based upon maybe statements he made. I don't know what statements he made, but hypothetically. Yeah. And then the defense expert's going to say, no, absolutely not. Look at him. There's no way that he knew the difference between right or wrong. He definitely suffered from a mental disease at that point. So really what it comes down to is a battle of the experts. And then eventually, if it looks like he was not guilty by reason of insanity, that's something that goes to the jury, right? And that, you have to couple that with, okay, so is he legally competent to even stand trial? And if he's not, then he gets sent to a mental institution where he gets medicated, and then he comes back when he determines, when the judge can determine, okay, this guy really knows what's happening here.
But he'll be locked up regardless if it's in a prison, if he's convicted, or a mental institution where no one can get hurt.
Correct. And now that he's facing first-degree murder charges, he's looking at 25 to life, and that's not including any potential enhancements that were alleged by the district attorney's office. So either way, it's 25 to life if the DA can prove it. And then the other option is if he's not, if they say he's not guilty by reason of insanity, or if they say that he's not competent, then mental institution. So.
Okay. I don't understand why there's a $5 million bail. Why is there any bail set?
The Constitution allows for reasonable bail to be set. And in some circumstances, I've seen judges set no bail. I have. And I know that up in Vista, Judge Hockett set $5 million bail, and that's a high bail, as it should be, because some of the factors that the judge has to look at is danger to society. Is this person going to pose a flight risk? Does this person have any ties to the community? Am I going to be fearful that he's going to commit something while he's out?
We don't want to be fearful. As San Diegans, we want to feel safe.
Right, I agree. I agree.
Well, we'll have you back as more, obviously as the story develops, we'll need your expertise.
Absolutely. I think it's a fascinating story.
Crazy. Thank you so much again for coming on Prime Time.